Marcello. I work for a company called Invica. I work in the training team. I'm the head of training. And this is a company that does software development, so does software development for other companies. It's like partnership, the technical partners for business. And they do full projects, but also engaging in helping other organizations transition to Agile. That's where I was growing within the organization. That's my path. I was not always technical person. My background is sociology, so I was sociology in the 80s, and then in the 90s I spent most of my time in monastery. I was a monk, and it was during my years in India that I met, it was that time that Steve Covey was very popular. There was a wave of Covey, the 7 Habits, was selling everywhere. You know, if you're old enough, you will remember the 7 Habits was very popular. And it was like management seminars, even in India, even in ashrams. You wouldn't escape, you would hear about these things. And Steve Covey was, one of the things that he talks a lot is empathy and empathic listening, active listening, and that kind of thing. So it was very impactful to me. At that time, I was planning a trip to my home country. I was actually born in Brazil. So when I went to Brazil, this is the guy turned monk coming back to his family to meet the family again. The entire Sunday with a family meeting, and you're dressed in your Hindu monk clothes, and kind of very interesting, peculiar conversations happening. I was raised by 2 uncles. They were like Marxists and atheists, and one of them particularly had a very hedonistic view of life and the world, and seeing this monk in front of him was very disturbing. And so I had this very interesting conversation. I was put on the spot in front of the entire family, and my uncle was shooting at me. Why are you doing this with your life? Why you're not going to parties? Why you're not, finding a good job and enjoying your life and going to the beaches and holidays? And I was like, I had just gone through the whole seminar of the 7 Habits thing. Plus, I was the monk. I have to be serene. I have to show my proper listening skills. And I was actually very, very present at that moment. And I was there actually listening to how he was feeling regarding me throwing away my life for being in monastery. And I could really connect to him. And at the end of it, him telling all that story to me, and all that preaching for me to get out of monastic life and do something useful for my life. And my response was like, I kind of expressed back to him what he has told me. So sounds like you feel that, me spending time with monastic life is not the best usage of my life, and since we only have one life, because you are an atheist and you don't believe in anything spiritual, you think that I could be possibly wasting my life, and that's very sad for you to see. And the response after that was part of the big experience that I have in discovering empathy, which is he was very, very happy. He was jumping on, yes, you understand me, so you agree with me. I never said that I agree with him, but he felt that because I had expressed the understanding of his position so well, and even naming the emotion, and really, I was really feeling it, that he was open to everything I had to say after that. And then since that day, he respected my position in a monastic life. It changed entirely our relationship from that point on. Just because we connected in a way that we have not connected before. I really gave myself to that moment of listening to another person and then express back, making sure the other person understood what I meant. So this feedback, I felt it was a very powerful discovery that I took on with me in a professional life. And I go to meetings sometimes where I have these persons with a strong view within an organization. You know, sometimes we can get very political about what we do and why we do what we do. And just taking the time to reflect back to the other person what you think their position is just changes the entire communication altogether. And this is one of the biggest secrets of my life. I think it's really, really open secrets. I believe software is not about zero and ones. I think software is mostly about people. It's not really hard to write software. I can say I spent many, many hours writing software. I wrote a lot of software. I don't think it's hard. I think what is really hard is everything around software. So people will use your software. You cannot write software disregarding that. People will develop software. It's people who develop software. It's people who is going to order and contract you, pay for your software, and they're going to sign off as well. It's all people. These are all people interaction happening in the process of writing software. So it's very, very central that we take a lot of consideration of the people factor. And empathy has a very, very strong position in this. I came to discover. I don't know if you know this book. There's a book by Constantine and Lockwood from 1999. They talk about user-centric design. And one of the things they talk in this book, and this is an idea that's very popular these days when you talk about UX and user experience, that people write software with not much consideration for the users. Just to give you an example, I went to a stand-up Scrum team. They were doing the stand-up, and in the room, the developer was saying, yesterday I was working on the recovery password feature, and I finished. And then I started now with the OAuth aspect of the other feature. And then the tester, when the tester, the QA person stepped forward and said, yesterday I was working on validating the recovery password feature, and the test all failed, it didn't work. And the developer was red and angry. How come it doesn't work? I wrote 14 tests, I did everything TDD, I did everything by the book, it's very good code, it has been the code reviewed, everything should work. He was really, really angry. And the tester, the QA guy, is a very simple person, he said, you actually don't have the recovery password link available in the UI, so... So this is just an example of, you can write very good code and be worth nothing if you're not thinking about who's going to use your software. And sometimes you write really good code, and there's little things you can do in the UI along the way, but you just don't have that presence, you don't have that awareness that you're writing software for a human being. You're not connected. And this is an example of how empathy is so important. You can really determine the effectiveness of your software. You can do things really, really well, like you can clean your boat. Our boat is clean, everyone is fed on the boat, everything is very efficient, but the boat is going to Alaska. It was supposed to be going to Australia. So effectiveness is important. And you achieve effectiveness if you actually connect with the other person. So that empathy has this beautiful ring to it, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Nowadays you have these two things separately. You have cognitive empathy, which is the ability to understand the other person, and you have emotional empathy, the affective empathy, which is actually the ability to feel what the other person is feeling. So that what it is some type of attention that you have to put in things, and you can do that in a very mechanical way if you're learning to do that, and eventually it becomes kind of a part of who you are, how you do things, how you communicate with people. You really become interested in the other person's view of the world and what they have to say. Of course, you don't have to be empathic 100% of your time. And for everything you do, you actually annoy some people if you, sounds like what you're saying. Sometimes people just want guidance and just want you to give them answers. Looking back at the Agile Manifesto, just so I understand my audience, are you on a project management side of things? Okay. Developers, coders, technical people, okay. And QAs, the rest of you? Yeah, I got it, yeah. Right, so, and everyone done Scrum, yeah? 100%. Okay, most people have done Scrum. Okay, so this is the principles behind the Agile Manifesto. It's a document that actually initiated what we call the Agile movement. This is like the back page of the Agile Manifesto. And if you look carefully on these words, you see there's a lot of reference to kind of being careful with what is it that is valuable for the user. You have things about collaborations in there. You have supportive environments for people working on the software. There's loads of elements of this special attention, face-to-face conversations, continuous attention to technical excellence. There's a lot of reference to empathy here, although it's never been something very, very clear that we're talking about empathy. What we have inherited from Japan, lean software development. Lean software development is a new idea, but lean manufacturing, you have this idea that which inspired a lot of our practices. Lean manufacturing is about you have the customer over there, which is pulling things, and we want to deliver value to that customer. And in doing that, we want to eliminate all the waste, all the fluffy things, all the yak shaving, and diminish the amount of things that we do, outputs of the stuff that we do, all the wasteful things, diminish them as much as we can, and just focus on the value on the other side. Yeah? So you have this idea that you have to, do some listening, and then all the way down there in Agile we have this idea of value. The idea of value has become more predominant than the idea of waste. Yes? But the idea of waste is actually what it actually started. In the lean manufacturing, it was like completely fanatical about waste. The guy who started all of this, Sakishi Toyoda, his name is Toyoda with a D, but we know the company as Toyota. And if you look at the two words, Toyota has two symbols like on top, the top right, it's two things like that. Toyota does not have those things. He changed his name, or he changed the name of the company to not waste extra neon lights. So that's how fanatical these people are about waste. And so waste was the main thing. Of course, if you try to eliminate waste to get value on one end, you're actually both talking about the same thing, just the emphasis is different. But if you look at Agile practices, how we know them today, there might be a lot of things that we consider, why do we have to do these things? Why do we write software? We write software for people to enjoy the results of it. We write software for someone to have some outcomes that will impact the business in a particular way. So it's directly related to something. Our users, the people who use our software, could not care less for our sprint planning. Could not care less for our estimation. Could not care less for requests for approvals and requirements, documents. The users don't want that. Of course, there are people who want that, and we have to be empathetic for everyone. But you can see what I mean. That this green area here, we should not take it for granted that we have to do the things that we're doing today to get from A to B. We do need to listen, and we need to empathize as much as possible and get to the value as quick and as effectively as possible. Now, how to do that? For this next half an hour or 45 minutes, I'll ask you to kind of park aside all of our ideas for Agile and challenge them a little bit to see if they are necessary to be on this green arrow, or if we can think of other ways to do this and achieve empathy, because that's what you want. You don't want agility. The customer does not want your agility. The users do not want your Scrum stand-up. They're not interested in your Agile stuff. They're interested in what you're producing with it. Yeah? So if you can empathize with everyone involved and achieve the same things, isn't that what you want? So Agile has enabled us to have this conversation. Before this, it was so unimaginable that we could challenge the ways of the world, work breakdown structure, Gantt charts, all of that. It was assumed to be the way to develop software. But now we thought, we are freer to think about the things, because Agile has come up and say, yeah, let's talk about value, deliver value. We can adapt to things, make things better. It's about change. This is the world that's changed, the 21st century, the age of information. Everything's changing very, very fast. Let's create a process that allows us to change fast as well. So deliver and adapt, rinse and repeat. Yeah? The values of Scrum, the values of Agile over there. Changing, enabling quality. There's an emphasis on a certain type of practices as well, and some forms of Agile, which is enabling, so quality is so strong that the software is now able to change very, very quickly. So this is ideas of the Agile movement that has then allowed us to have this kind of conversation. Okay, can we focus on these values and forget about, or at least diminish the importance of the process there that we follow in the name of those principles. So one of the tools that we use to communicate requirements is a user story. And user story is a very interesting piece of conversation, communication, isn't it? In order to improve my courses as a teacher, I would like to receive feedback from attendees. It gives stakeholders a chance to communicate their needs. So that's empathetic, isn't it? So it's a way to kind of collect tokens about things that we want to have conversations about. And that's actually the idea that was presented by Ron Jeffries in 2001 when he wrote about user story. User story has been around since maybe 1998. It was the first time that we hear the word like that, user stories. But it's been, the 3 C's, the card, conversation, and confirmation is 2001. So it's, and the idea is there are tokens. There are things there that remind us first to have conversations about things that we want to, that we believe deliver value for us. But very soon, because we're used to the old ways, we have this work breakdown structure that looks like this, and a Gantt chart that goes like forever. Have you seen one of those Gantt charts? Yeah? So imagine a product backlog and put it like this. But now we revert the thing. Now we have all the Gantt chart, we done like this, and we say that we are Agile. But what we've done, we satisfy the feeling of our customers. I don't know, do you work for your own companies, or who work for yourselves? Okay, who deliver software for other companies? Okay, when you deliver software for other companies, is that true or not? You have to be, there's a comfort. The customer wants to know that all the things that they want are in the list. You're not forgetting anything. Yeah? That's this requirements is the center of the communication. It's required. Someone is going to die if you don't do this feature. It cannot be deployed without this feature. Yeah? So it's exactly the same as before. We have to, most code the spreadsheets won't be different. It's the same thing. So we're taking the tools that were developed under the values of agility, and we have turned them around to do the things the same way we did before we did Agile. So product backlogs, they have this possibility, they can set expectations around requirements. They put the mindset in the wrong place. Instead of thinking of the goals and what you're trying to achieve and the value of the software, you're now having conversations about, it is a requirement, therefore it has to go in. Why? Because it is a requirement. So that wasn't the idea of user stories. That wasn't the initial idea. The State of Scrum is a report that's produced from time to time to kind of collect. It's a sample of about 4,000, 5,000 people doing Scrum, the Agile processes. This is done by the Scrum Alliance. And you can see here the numbers. 96% of people doing work out there some kind of agile, they will be doing Scrum. So Scrum is the most used kind of process within the agile thing. Is that you? What are you using? Scrum? Yeah? Okay. So Scrum was born under these three pillars: inspect, adapt, visibility, and transparency. This is the idea, the initial idea, and that's how they sold at the beginning. You have inspect and adapt, and you have transparency. I remember in 2009, when I was in the Scrum gathering in Orlando, Florida, there was a panel with Ken Schwaber and Alistair Coburn, and they were talking about if you have to boil down Scrum to like two truths, two or three things, what would be Scrum for you? And Ken Schwaber is the guy who came up with Scrum, and Alistair Coburn is the guy behind Crystal Clear, but they also together in the Agile Manifesto thing. And they said, ask the team, inspect and adapt and deliver every month or often. So this was like the core of Scrum for them. And you can see these things are kind of matching here. So this is what Scrum was born to be. But nowadays, if you look, and also there's other practices. You have XP who try to cover other areas as well within, this is just a portion of XP, just to show that XP concentrated also on the engineering practices that underline the agile processes that Scrum is very like on the outside, on the boundaries. So the agile practices has helped make software softer. You can see from the XP practices, they are all designed to kind of make the software more sustainable, so you can change things. Software is softer. You can change. You can change it. It's not like a building. Like you do the second floor, you have to continue building that way. Software is not like that. You do an increment, and you can change the direction of software. It's supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be able to change it. So that's what Agile gives us. If you look at how Scrum is doing today, I travel a lot with other organizations and check and see how they're doing Scrum. And yeah, you can wave your head like this if you resonate with some of the things. So there's a big emphasis on commitment and throwing back to the team. You know, we rely on your commitment. You have to commit and you have to finish everything within your sprint, otherwise the release planning is doomed. It's all down to the team to commit, and velocity and estimation is very important. Estimation, we need the estimation, because estimation generates the commitment and the velocity, so we can understand your progress. And there's acceptance criteria. We need a clear definition of done. If it's not clear, we don't know how to verify, therefore our contracts are doomed. And this is a contractual relationship. It's Scrum, Agile, looking, yeah. But we need to verify, and we have to be very clear so we can validate. And shake hands. And then if you have stories that are depending on each other, you can't do Scrum. Why? Because you should be able to pick any stories on the backlog that you like. You cannot do, dependent stories. So there is a dependency of Scrum that you can't. If you have too many independent stories, you should not be doing Scrum. You should be doing something else. Or the reliance on this person who is a product owner, who is this demigod who comes here and gives the priority, and if he's not present or if he's on paternal leave, then we're doomed. There's nobody to give us priorities, and he's the person who decides, and he's the person who approves everything. Where is the product owner? It's a fragile relationship and depends so much on the PO. I know these are all eternal truths. We all love these truths, but it's a real fragile relationship that exists and a risk within Scrum. I'm not telling you not to do Scrum, by the way, and there's not many things as good as Scrum. It's like democracy. It's a love-hate relationship. Engineering practices in Scrum does not prescribe them. Yeah, if you just follow everything, the Scrum guidance is not. I wasn't, by the way, disclaimer, I didn't watch the session last week with Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. Chances are this has changed. I haven't watched yet. You can correct us at that if you want to make a comment or something. But all of these things are there. The value motivated the process, and then we forgot the values. We have this beautiful process that came out of nice, agile, manifested values, and we follow it because it works. They're based on solid values. Scrum is based on very solid values in adaptation, inspection, visibility, and the values of Scrum, human interaction over processes and tools. And all of a sudden we are doing the same thing as waterfall times, exactly the same thing, but instead of having a 9-month waterfall, we are having 2 weeks waterfall, but it's exactly the same thing. Right? So I'm not saying this is the truth of every single place, but have you recognized some of these patterns? Yeah? I see almost every single head going like this. So I noticed that agility can be, you can go very quickly in a place and identify the kind of agility that they have. I have a name for these agilities. The first one I call the managed agility. And then I have the coached agility. And then I have the own agility. So the managed agility is the agility that you have been told to do. So we're moving into Agile, we're moving to Scrum. Someone is coming here and delivering some Scrum training, and we're all going to be doing Scrum. It starts like that. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes if someone inside of their company say, there's this cool thing called Scrum, let's all do it. And everybody starts doing it. No problem. They understand what's in it for them and they start doing it, they feel motivated to do it. And all this new process come in, they have to follow, and there's those champions in the organization that's going to push forward. It's just like any other change management system. Like, no, you have to change the organization to follow this new thing. But at this point, what people really want is for you to tell them what to do. Just tell me what to do. Self-organization, no, just tell me what to do. Yesterday I was blah, 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 blah. Today I am blah, 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 blah. I have no impediment, sir. And everybody looks to the PM and does the same reporting every day. And they do that in a very military way, very managed way. Yeah? They don't really understand the values and the reasons why they're doing that. Yeah? You recognize some of this? This is the managed agility. There's nothing wrong with it. This is very useful if you're trying to bring a team into doing some Scrum. You can start like this, supporting them like this. And then what happens after a while is that people start getting, the fact that we synchronize every day, it has created some team resonance. I kind of resonate more with the team. I work better with the team. I understand the point of this now. They start getting what is this about. And then we can bring some coaches in, and then they start showing you could do the retrospective like this. It will be much more useful. And they see and they pick it up. This is different than telling them to do, your retrospective is wrong, your sprint planning is wrong, that's not the coaching. That's not coaching. So coaching is actually showing them, giving them an example, and then they see, that's cool. Or you can just be there and help them enable their confidence. Whenever they have questions, you go and support. But they're starting to get the reasons why they're doing these things. So they understand the principles, and the principles start becoming more relevant than the processes. And your role as a coach of this kind of team is to ask good questions, and then help them from that point on. Until you get to a point where the team start really owing their agility. And this is where they become more empathic and they actually want to understand why they're doing what they're doing and why they're serving this. What is it that they really need to do for the stakeholders that are involved in this process. They are genuinely interested in the value of what they're doing. And at this point, they start challenging the processes. Why do we do things this way? Can we not do things that way? And then this is the point where you can contextualize and say, for this project, this makes perfect sense. For that project, let's do this. For that project, let's do this. Contextualize. So owned agility is a lot more systemic and a lot less regimented. So there are things within software development which has become very apparent to me. So if you look at software development isn't something that is not an agreeable activity. Yeah. Well, when you come together with a bunch of guys and write some code, guys and girls, and you're writing some code, people disagree, and the customer don't agree with you, and the QA, he doesn't agree with you. It's not an agreeable, and the PO goes in one direction, the team goes in another direction, the Scrum Master is screaming something else. It's not an agreeable thing at all. Why? Because you have these driving forces behind software development. And maybe the reasons why you have some efforts like in Scrum, you have these 3 roles, separating things, you see it matches really well. It's a direction. Give me everything now. I need everything now. And these people saying, oh no, we need Docker. It's going to take another 2 weeks. We need to do this in DDD or SHMDD or BDD or TDD or something DD. And I want to do it in that language because it has syntax sugar. So it's a different, it's a different direction, isn't it? It's not compatible. And these guys there are saying sustainability, maintainability. Someone is going to maintain this code. We need quality. We need a sustainable pace. Yeah? You see the stages in software development. They are there. So empathy cannot be a two-dimensional thing, like I listen to you. There's a lot of people who have to listen to each other. This isn't enough. So we have said users, listen to them and then make them happy. This is not enough. We need more than that, because there's a lot of people. Empathy is empathy at many levels. We have to analyze how we can empathize better with all these dimensions that are around software development. And then this is the work that we actually should be doing. When we talk, for example, in the lean manufacturing, there is this idea of a manager in the lean manufacturing. What he's actually managing is a process. Yeah? And by manage the process doesn't mean that he's there changing the process, but he's enabling people to take control of the process, suggest ideas to the process, and that is his work. His work is kind of help design the process that creates the more flow. Yeah? The work that we have to do in software development is to create empathy, because the quickest you get to agreement is the quickest you get to the right solution. So some stories just to illustrate this. The first one was in a company that they are like what is the name of this kind of business? Charity. So there's a charity company in London. I was asked to coach the Scrum Master of this company. And the Scrum Master, he was a bit bewildered because he thought he was doing everything right. He was doing the sprint planning, the developers were looking at the things, came in, they were doing the estimation themselves. The Scrum Master was very proud. The team is estimating themselves, they are picking their own tasks, they are making their commitments, and, surprise, they're actually finishing everything within the sprints, everything that they commit to. But still, when it comes to time for the releasing software, they were far behind what they're supposed to be releasing. Do you understand what I mean? They're committing all right, well, they are committing and delivering according to their commitments, but that commitment did not take into account the amount of work that they needed for the entire release. Do you understand? So I told the Scrum Master that they should do a release planning together with the team. The team should have a clear understanding of the vision of the sprint, and added to that release planning, they should have a statement about the vision of the release on their wall, so they could have visibility of why they're doing what they're doing and trying to connect to the people to whom they are building software. For them it was really easy because they're building something from some people in Africa. So it's very easy to connect in this case, because if they didn't have the software available at that time, someone would go without water, or maybe someone would die. And that was a very compelling reason. And you may say, oh, but that wouldn't apply in my company. Well, I've seen that the same kind of thing apply just by having a clear release vision stated on the walls. And it was very business related in this case, in a company in Spain. It really changed the attitude of the developers towards the project. They really want to be connected to the goals of what they're doing. Goals is really important. If you go to any coaching methodology, any coaching techniques, this is where they start. They start with goals. If people can connect to goals, if you can connect to vision, they'll be a lot more involved in it. People want to do a good job. They just need to see what their goals are and how they're progressing towards their goals. Two things. They have to have visibility of their goals, and they have visibility of their progress. And they will do a good job if they have those two things. Another one is this business tech ratio thing that I saw in a company in Ireland in December. So this is the other kind of empathy. Empathy from the business towards the developers. And you may think, oh, what? The business have to be empathetic to the developers? Let the developers write code, and they have already motivation. We pay them. But then, there's these two contrasting forces in capitalism. Capitalism, you have these people that would accept any work, the traders, and you pay for their work and they accept it and they do it for you. A good example would be, for example, if you go to a hairdresser and you need a haircut and say, I want a haircut, and they're going to ask you, how would you like it? Yeah, and then you say, I would like short, I would like to do like this, like this. They're not going to take over your hair and they just make a Mohican of your hair. They can't do that unless you give permission, unless you give consent. This is how I want my hair. That's trading, yeah? And this is a part of capitalism. This thing is a big part of capitalism. The other part of capitalism is initiative and innovation. And there are professions that have elements of both. And in our community, the community of code crafters, we have two. We have the two. We have the people who come to us and say, write some code. Why do I have to write this way? Shut up and write it. And then you have to put up with it and just do what you're told. But in other cases, that is not you anymore. You are in another level of developers. You are building a certain type of software that it's not that kind of thing anymore. So you need to empathize with that group as well and understand the negative effects that this kind of communication causes in the community and the developers. So what this business tech ratio is, I thought it was really interesting. So they had implemented Lean in an organization. So I saw the boards everywhere. And this particular team, I saw that the queue here on the left side had a number, a ratio. And I was very curious. Well, what is this? I asked, what is this? This is interesting. And they said, oh, this is our business tech ratio. Well, what does it mean? Oh, it means that if we think something is important from the technical point of view, and we have failed to make the point across, we can put it in a business tech ratio. And we agreed that for every 3 business items, 1 technical item will go in. That's our agreement with the business. So if you need to do some refactoring, we can put an item there, and every 3 business things that go up, we are allowed to put it on one of our technical things. And they will go, God, they're so happy. They're so motivated just because of that. Because then they have, but there are some rules. You cannot take longer. It cannot be a massive epic. That there was, they were measuring the cycle time. So that was all taken care of. So it was an explicit policy. And there was this other company in Rotterdam who had a very interesting problem. The owner was someone who was a coder 8 years ago, wrote some software that was completely monolithic and crappy and spaghetti, and made a lot of money with it. And now he can't change anything, and then he hires lots of developers to help him get out of the mess. And the developers, okay, we're going to get out of the mess, but we're going to do all the D things. We're going to do the BDD, SHMDD, everything D. Most code development, all the way. And you're going to support that. You're going to allow us to do all of our... And then the guy said, okay, I'm good. And he actually, at some point, he became a blind follower of the team. Whatever the technical team told him to do, he would do it. Over time, there was less and less sensitivity to the business. He was not strong enough to communicate the direction and the urgency of the business. And the time to markets just dropped so drastically that they had to hire a consultancy, in this case, a consultant, in this case me, to come and help, to turn things in the other direction. So went there and did some business workshop together so they could see the business working, the same impact mapping, and converted that DDD to something less expensive, modeling by example, that kind of thing. So you had to empathy on the other way around, make the team empathetic towards the business. So we have to challenge our processes. Okay? For example, question to you, is it possible to deliver software without estimation? If you think yes, it's possible, raise your hands. Without estimation. Okay? If you don't think it's possible to do software without estimation, raise your hand. Yeah. Okay? Some people think yes, some people think no. So the point I'm making is just that challenging, not just estimation. Everything in that green arrow, everything that is not value for the customer on the other side. But to challenge it, you need to know the alternatives. Yeah, but there's many ways to do estimation, and there's a way you can do without estimation as well. There's many ways to do requirements, many ways to do planning, many ways to look at lessons learned, many ways to look at acceptance criteria. Are we doing the best way possible in this context? Are we doing the best way possible for the people involved in this process? So estimation is actually, when people say we need an estimation, what they're actually meaning is that we need some way to identify the costs. And that's why people say, no, we cannot do software. So that's one of the reasons why people say we cannot do software without estimation, because we need to tell someone how much they're going to pay in the end. Okay? Which is actually not the meaning of estimation, but that's how it is understood in our profession. So there's many ways you can do that. You have a forecast approach, an empirical approach, a planning poker, a historical approach. You have PERTs back in the day. You have cycle time, which looks backwards and see how much you're spending, and then you can project. And you have the no estimates coming up. So there are many ways you can do things. So the empirical approach, for example, is do a little bit and then see your trend and then estimate that you're going to do in the same trend the rest of the way. The forecast is break things down, estimate them just for like 1 or 2 sprints, and then figure out the velocity based on your estimation, and then forecast for the rest of the work how much it's going to take, using the same measure of time to story points. The historical approach is the same team, is the same PO, the same kind of project, the same tools, nothing changed. We just use the same kind of estimation that we have for the previous projects because it should be okay. PERT is old French technique to you have the mean time, so how much you think is most likely, the less likely, and then you divide them by 6. So there's many techniques for estimating. And cycle time is that you do and then you just observe what you're doing, and then you understand how long it takes for you since the moment you start working on something to the moment that you deploy. How long does it take? The items. How many items are you doing? See your throughput, see your cycle time. By observing backwards, then the business will know how much they can ask you. So there are many ways you can do it. You don't have, and in this case, you're actually not estimating anything. You're just producing software, and by looking time at what the time you're spending on it, then you can infer for the next project. Requirements is the same thing. We assume, we make assumptions that things have to be the way they are because that's how we know how to do them. We have a process. Please bow down to the process. So we have this thing, we spend some time discovering things in the beginning. Who does discoveries here, impact mapping and that kind of thing? Some discoveries, yeah. And then you do iterations, loads of iterations, and then at the end, after doing loads of sprints, you deliver for the first time after, 10 months. This gives me chills. This is, you're calling it agile, but agile, if you remember, the highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery. You do loads of little iterations, but you're not deploying. You don't get the user's feedback. You're not experimenting anything. You can't call it agile. So this will be a bit more agile way of doing things. You just do something. You call it an experiment. Do something. It's all the way to the end. Don't do all of your iterations. Make assumptions, test your assumptions, and then build with your learning. Of course, you can't do that in every case. I've been telling you, we have to contextualize in every situation. If you have a customer who agrees with the way of working that is more compatible with the way that the Scrum advises or the way the market is doing, then you just follow the way that the context is telling you to do. But you have to challenge. You have to see, can we do this in a different way? Okay? So the Lean startup guy wrote this book, and he doesn't like calling things products. He called them experiments. This is a way to look at it. And if you go in that line, you won't call things requirements. You just call them hypotheses. So you want to try things out. So here's an example. If I can eliminate office waste, I can eliminate costs by eliminating office waste. So office waste is people in office spending time doing procedures, processes internally. So using hypotheses instead of user stories to describe that. This is from Jeffrey Taylor. So a user story would be, in order to do something, as someone, I would like to do something. A hypothesis would be different, to be, I believe that someone will behave this way because, and these are my reasons. It gives you an opportunity to connect with the person's beliefs and reasons to do something. There you go, empathy, straight away. The communication changed. You are listening. Why are you so biased toward this? Why do you want this feature? They have to give the reason. They have to give the reason why they believe that feature is important. Then you run an experiment. Say, okay, let's just try your idea. Get employees to do their own travel request. Okay, I believe our employees will be happy to do their own travel and accommodation arrangements within budget because they will have more freedom of choice and they will win loyalty points for their credit cards. So that's his hypothesis. It's okay, but now we have to measure. Okay, but you only have to measure one at a time. You have to write your tests. Choose a subset of employees, agree the budget with relevant stakeholders, then gather your feedback after the engagement and see if that worked. Just run one time this cycle. Build, measure, learn, empathize. Empathize, it's the most important step. That is not in the Lean book, by the way. You need to start from understanding, touching base with the people who are going to be impacted by the software. All right? Another way to empathize, this is very recent. This conference happened on the 29th of June, SPA in London. Forgot her name, Jamie. She presented this idea of writing stories with, what's her name? Jenny. I forgot her name. Were you there?
Oh, I was queued up.
Oh, okay. So an amazing idea. So people get involved and there's a story there, and there's a little bit of empathy, conversation, and you can understand how people would actually feel if the feature were implemented. And you can do that very quickly, collaboratively with the software for that. You don't have to do of course you don't have to do the comics and everything. You just can drag and drop the actors and just write the conversation. Don't think that this is overdoing anything before you think. There are other options to this. So requirements the same. There's many ways you can contextualize requirements. But the main thing is contextualize. Don't take anything for granted. Yeah? What estimations approach is more convenient in this case? How much requirements? How much are we going to put details of the requirement? How much planning is required? Can we run an experiment? Can we do without software? Is there a low-hanging fruit we can test? How much conversations over features? How much, what roles do we need in here? Do we need all the roles? Do we need less roles, more roles? What processes and tools can we use? Using our brain. Agility has opened up software development. It has made software development softer. But software is not about the software, it's not about the code. It's about the lives that it touches. And there is empathy already in Agile. There's empathy in Agile Manifest and the principles of Agile. But we forget the values very, very quickly because we like processes like anything. Let's own our own agility. Let's go back to our values, reevaluate why we do things, and connect with the real needs of the people involved in the process. I am Marcello. I work for a company called Invica. I sometimes contribute to open source. I do some agile transformations, and I can be found on Twitter with MD. Thank you.